Good morning. Today we're talking about Daniel chapter 3, and it's really exciting. So you need to imagine, right, that you're in a palace, the Hanging Gardens, whatever have you. And you also have to imagine that King Nebuchadnezzar is there because he's kind of important for this. So he's there, and these Chaldeans come over, and the Chaldeans are basically like magic snitches. They're very famous for astrology and things, but also maybe possibly not having too many scruples when it comes to snitching on their neighbors. And they come to the king, and they go through the usual supplication along with the king. The king has a long line, and they build it up, right? They do a good setup. And so they say, you know, didn't you say, Your Majesty, that if anyone hears the music, and then this is kind of fun because it's different musical instruments depending on what version of the Bible you're looking at. So sometimes it says the horn and the flute and the zither and the lyre and the harp and the pipe. And sometimes it's like the cornets and the sackbut. And the sackbut is like a fancy trombone kind of a thing. And they say if you heard the music right, you're supposed to fall down and worship the idol. And if you don't, they're going to throw you in the furnace. Those are the rules, right? And he says, yeah. The king says, yeah. Those are the rules. Those are the rules. So then the Chaldeans say, well, hold on. We've got something to tell you. There's these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are over there in Babylon managing stuff. And they have chosen to ignore you and ignore your order. And they don't worship your idol when they hear the music playing. I don't know. Maybe they dance. I don't know what they do when they hear it. Nebuchadnezzar gets really mad. Rage, it says in my translation. He gets full of rage. And so he calls them back. He calls Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He's like, oh, yeah. And they come over. And he says, is it true that when you hear the music, the horn and the flute and the zither and the harp and the pipe, you aren't falling down and worshiping the God? And they say, well, yeah. And he says, he gets a little uppity, right? Nebuchadnezzar does a little bit. And he says, okay, what God is going to rescue you from me? Huh? Who's going to save you from me? And so then the three men say, we don't need to defend ourselves. If we're thrown in the furnace, the God that we serve will deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from you. Be it known, Your Majesty. I love that. Be it known, Your Majesty, that we will not worship your gods and your idols. They said, no, not going to do it. So Nebuchadnezzar gets really angry. Imagine, okay, if he was at an 8, I'd like to think that he probably lives around a 5. Okay, so he was at a 5 when we started. He goes up to an 8, right, when they snitch on him. Okay, so now let's say he's at a 12 out of 10. He's a 12 out of 10. And he says, heat up the furnace 7 times hotter than you normally heat it up. Which is, a furnace is normally really hot, so imagine really hot times 7. And he says, get me some soldiers, and some soldiers come in. And he orders the soldiers to tie him up, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He says, tie him up. So they tie them up, and the soldiers go to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace. And the furnace is so hot, it kills the soldiers, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fall in on their own because the heat killed the soldiers before they could throw them in. So imagine, that's how hot it is, right? It kills these soldiers just by walking next to it. And I imagine, right, a minute passes. The Bible doesn't say moments pass, but I imagine a moment passed. And Nebuchadnezzar leaps to his feet, and he says, oh, hang on. He says, hey, didn't we throw 3 guys in to the furnace? And they say, yeah, you did. You had 3 guys in. He says, and how come I see 4 people in the furnace? Unbound and unharmed. And he says, the 4th one looks like the Son of God. So he says, hey, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, in the furnace, uh, come out of the furnace. And they walk right out. And everyone is crowding around them because they're very surprised. They're not burned. They're not singed. They don't smell like fire. It's kind of a surprise. Um, and at this moment in time, Nebuchadnezzar has a total change of heart. And he starts singing the praises of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he says, they trusted in him and were willing to defy the king himself, and die rather than any god other than their own. He admires this. And he says, he decrees, he loves decrees. This is the third time the word decree has showed up in this chapter. He decrees anyone who says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego must be cut into pieces and their house turned to rubble. Cut into pieces and their house is turned to rubble. And he ends with this. He says, no other God can save in this way. Cut into pieces and their houses turned to rubble. If anyone says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because no other God can save in this way. Isn't that amazing?